I said get out of the car right now. Hands where I can see them. Do you hear me? You think this is a game? Turn that off and step away from the vehicle. I know, but I have to do this. I'm not backing down now, not after everything we've been through.
Marcus James gripped the steering wheel, heart thudding against his ribs, as the red and blue lights slammed onto the hood of his car. It wasn't his fault the taillight was broken. He'd meant to fix it. But the officer walking toward him didn't seem interested in details. Officer Harrington's boots crunched against the asphalt, each step loud in the quiet suburban street. "License and registration," Harrington said, eyes flicking over Marcus like he was already guilty. The tone was sharp, almost predatory. Marcus fumbled with his wallet, aware of the officer's hand twitching near his holster. Every movement felt magnified, every sound amplified. The hum of the street lamp above, the distant bark of a dog, the rhythmic tap of Harrington's pen against the patrol car. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" Harrington sneered, the question rhetorical. Marcus shook his head, mouth dry. Just a taillight," he whispered. Harrington's laugh cut through the night. "Right. You know we don't have time for excuses like that. You look suspicious." A sharp chill ran down Marcus's spine as he realized this wasn't about a light or a ticket. It was about control. Cameras flashed from a neighbor's porch, unnoticed, live streams pinging notifications across town. And in that moment, Marcus made a decision. He reached for his phone. "I'm recording," he said, voice steady now, cutting through the tension like a blade. Harrington froze, a flicker of unease crossing his face. But before Marcus could capture what came next, the officer lunged, and the world blurred into shouts, sirens, and flashing lights. Marcus James eased his car to the side of the quiet street, heart pounding. Red and blue lights splashed across the cracked asphalt, stinging the edges of his vision. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, sweat collecting at the nape of his neck. He hadn't even noticed the broken taillight. He'd meant to fix it last week. But Officer Harrington's footsteps crunching on the gravel told him this stop would be more than routine. "License and registration," Harrington demanded, voice clipped, eyes narrowing. Marcus fumbled with his wallet, every second stretching like taffy. "Evening, officer," Marcus said, trying to keep his tone calm. "You know why I stopped you?" Harrington asked, tilting his head, a smirk playing at his lips. Marcus shook his head, voice barely audible. "A taillight." Harrington laughed, sharp and condescending. "Right. Because people don't drive with broken lights. Suspicious people, that is." Marcus felt the familiar, heavy sting of recognition. This wasn't about traffic laws. His chest tightened. The officer's hand hovered near the holster, a subtle warning masked as readiness. He spotted a faint glow from a neighbor's porch camera, blinking like a distant lighthouse. Marcus's fingers hovered over his phone. If he recorded this, the truth would speak. "I'm recording," Marcus said, voice steadier than he felt. Harrington froze, the smirk faltering. "Step out of the car," Harrington barked. The sudden motion, the glare of the flashlight, the sharp click of the handcuffs, the world contracted. Shouts and barking dogs echoed from every side, merging with the whine of the siren. Marcus's mind raced. He could end this quietly, or he could let it all be seen. Before he could decide, Harrington's hand lunged toward him, and the phone slipped from Marcus's grip, clattering onto the asphalt. Red, blue, and white lights reflected in his widened eyes as the world spiraled into shouts and chaos. Marcus yanked the phone off the asphalt, heart still racing. The screen glowed with his shaky live stream buffering, but the comments had already begun to pour in. "This is insane. He's being unfair. Call the news." The small red dot blinked insistently. Live, unstoppable, real. He backed up a step, chest tight, and replayed the flashes of Harrington's glare, the rigid tension of the officer's posture. Every viewer could see it now. The control Harrington tried to impose, the silent weight of suspicion aimed at Marcus for nothing more than the color of his skin. His phone buzzed incessantly. Notifications from Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook flooded in. Marcus's stomach knotted. Was this relief? Or a new kind of danger? He couldn't tell. A neighbor, Mrs. Latham, stepped onto her porch. "I saw everything. You handled that so well," she said. Her voice trembled with a mix of awe and fear. "People are sharing it already. Everyone needs to see this." "I didn't feel very brave," Marcus muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. "I just didn't want it to end up twisted like they always do." Meanwhile, Harrington was already on the phone in his patrol car. His tone clipped, authoritative. "Yes, I know. The civilian's recording went viral. We need to spin this fast." Marcus scrolled through the comments. Some were supportive, some cynical. Probably lying. He shouldn't have resisted. He exhaled sharply. This was the double-edged sword of exposure. Every story he told would be dissected, every nuance questioned. He tapped the end live button, but the damage, or the truth, was already out. The tension in his chest lingered as he realized Harrington's anger hadn't faded. It had multiplied. Somewhere in that patrol car, the officer was plotting, and Marcus's life had irrevocably shifted. The phone buzzed again. A news alert flashed. Local man's police encounter sparks viral outrage. Marcus's pulse quickened. The world was watching now. And somewhere in the shadows of Harrington's patrol car, the officer's eyes narrowed. Marcus's phone had captured more than a taillight. It had captured a reckoning. The next morning, Marcus sat in his apartment, coffee growing cold in the mug he hadn't touched, eyes glued to his laptop. The live stream from last night had exploded overnight. Thousands of shares, tens of thousands of comments, and even news outlets had picked it up. His heart still hammered, but this time it wasn't just fear. It was determination. His phone rang, and he hesitated before answering. The caller ID read, "Internal Affairs, City Police Department. Marcus James." A woman asked, professional but clipped. "We need you to come in for a statement regarding the incident last night." Marcus's stomach sank. He'd anticipated backlash, but nothing had prepared him for the institutional machinery he was about to face. Yes, I'll come in," he said, voice steadier than he felt. The ride to the precinct was tense. Every stoplight, every passing patrol car felt like a potential trap. When he arrived, the sterile scent of cleaning supplies and coffee hung heavy in the air. A uniformed officer led him into a small interview room. Harrington's name came up immediately, and Marcus felt the familiar tight coil of anxiety. Across the table, a woman in a plain blouse introduced herself as Detective Lee from Internal Affairs. Her gaze was sharp but neutral. "Mr. James, we've reviewed preliminary footage of last night's stop. We need a detailed account of your version of events." Marcus took a deep breath and recounted everything. The minor taillight, Harrington's aggressive tone, the hovering hand, the moment he decided to record. He included every flash of the neighbor's porch camera, every word Harrington had said. Detective Lee nodded occasionally, typing rapidly. "We'll need the video files and any witness contacts. Can you provide that?" "Yes," Marcus said. "Everything I captured is intact." "And the neighbors?" He hesitated, unsure how much to expose. They were recording too. Lee's eyes flicked up sharp. That helps. This is an official investigation. We'll handle it discreetly. As Marcus left the room, he passed Harrington, who was leaning casually against a wall, arms crossed. The officer's eyes met his, icy and unreadable. Marcus felt the old, familiar weight of suspicion. Every step, every glance meant calculation. Harrington didn't say a word, but the message was clear. This isn't over. Later, Marcus's lawyer, Tanya Brooks, reviewed the footage. This is strong, she said, tension in her jaw. It shows bias, intimidation, and abuse of power. But the department will push back. They'll protect him. You need to be prepared. I know, Marcus said. I didn't expect it to get this big. You didn't have to, Tanya said. You did the right thing. But the system doesn't move fast. You'll see delays, denials, even personal attacks. They want to make you doubt yourself. Back at home, Marcus scrolled through the comments. Some were supportive, voices echoing outrage at Harrington's behavior. Others doubted him, labeling him a troublemaker, questioning motives. Every word stung, but he reminded himself, this is what happens when you expose power. By evening, the police department issued a statement. Carefully worded, it praised Harrington's professionalism, while acknowledging a routine traffic stop had been misunderstood. Marcus read it, jaw tight. They were spinning the narrative, minimizing Harrington's intimidation, and planting seeds of doubt about him. The next day, a local reporter, Dana Collins, contacted him. Mr. James, we'd like to cover your story. Can you speak on camera? Marcus hesitated, aware of Harrington's potential reactions. I want people to see the truth, he finally said. But I don't want this to put anyone else at risk. Dana nodded. We can protect your identity if needed, but the public deserves to know what happened. Later that evening, Harrington appeared in the precinct's hallways, talking quietly to his colleagues. Marcus saw him from a distance, smirking, nodding, pointing discreetly toward the cameras and monitors. The implication was clear. He was rallying support, spinning his own narrative and plotting. Tanya warned Marcus. They're going to try to discredit you. Any slip, any hesitation, they'll use it against you. Keep meticulous records. Document everything. Marcus nodded but felt a ripple of unease. It wasn't just the department. It was the culture behind it, the casual systemic bias that allowed Harrington to feel untouchable. Every interaction, every casual remark, carried the weight of decades of unchecked authority. At night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He replayed Harrington's words, the cold professionalism, the glances that lingered too long. He thought about the neighbors who had recorded, the strangers who had witnessed the injustice online, and the growing audience following his story. He whispered to himself, almost a vow, I won't be silenced. I won't let this slide. But even as determination burned, Marcus knew the reality. The system that should protect citizens was already closing ranks around Harrington. He was just one man, a lone voice against institutional inertia. And somewhere in the echoing corridors of the precinct, Harrington's eyes narrowed at a screen showing Marcus's statement. A slow, deliberate smile spread across his face. He thinks he's safe. We'll see about that. Marcus closed his laptop and stared out the window, city lights flickering in the distance. Somewhere between fear and resolve, he realized this battle was only beginning. By midweek, Marcus's life had shifted into a tense, precarious rhythm. His phone vibrated constantly. Messages from friends, family, strangers, and followers. Some offered support. You're brave. Stay strong. But others carried a chill under their words. Watch your back. You'll regret this. He couldn't ignore them. Harrington's influence stretched farther than he'd imagined. Even online, shadows of intimidation appeared in the form of threatening comments and private messages. Marcus's chest tightened every time a notification popped up. At work, the tension followed him like a shadow. He noticed colleagues avoiding eye contact, whispers halting when he entered the room. The minor traffic stop had exploded into a public spectacle, and everyone had an opinion, but nobody wanted to risk siding with him. The first physical sign of danger arrived in the form of an envelope slid under his apartment door. No return address. Inside, a single note printed in block letters. Stay quiet or regret it. Alongside it was a photo of Harrington's badge number, close and detailed, as if to remind him of the officer's power. Marcus's hands shook as he read it. The city felt suddenly smaller, every shadow heavier. He showed the note to Tanya, his lawyer. "This is harassment," she said firmly. "We'll file a report, but you need to be careful." Harrington's reach. "It's bigger than we thought." Later that evening, Marcus met with a few neighbors who had witnessed the incident. Their voices were low, hesitant. "I got a call from someone, threatening me," said Mrs. Latham. "They know my name, my street. I'm scared." Marcus nodded, swallowing his own fear. "We'll figure this out together. Don't back down. But be smart. Keep your distance." At home, Marcus reviewed the live stream over and over. Each frame felt heavier now, layered with new meaning. Harrington's glare, his hand near the holster, the way he moved with practiced intimidation. It wasn't just a single officer. It was the culture he represented, one that protected him and punished the voices that challenged him. The threats weren't just online or in envelopes. One night, a car slowly drove past Marcus's apartment. He caught glimpses of two men inside, faces obscured by shadows, lingering longer than normal traffic. He called Tanya immediately. "I think they're following me," he whispered. Tanya's voice was calm but urgent. "Document everything. Take photos. Note license plates. But don't confront them. We need evidence, not provocation." The tension carried into his workdays. Every routine errand, grocery store, gas station, even walking his dog, felt fraught with uncertainty. Every uniformed officer he saw sparked a pulse of anxiety. Marcus felt the constant weight of surveillance, both real and imagined. Then came the escalation. Harrington's colleagues, quietly aligned with him, began contacting neighbors and witnesses, sowing doubt about Marcus's character. "He's making it up," one officer told Mrs. Latham. "You can't trust him." The whisper campaigns, small but insidious, were effective. Fear began to ripple through the neighborhood. At a coffee shop, Marcus overheard a conversation between two men at a nearby table. "That guy who live-streamed Harrington. Heard he's exaggerating. Bad news, that one." Marcus felt his chest tighten again. Even strangers were echoing Harrington's narrative. That night, Marcus called his brother, Devin. "I can't stop thinking about what could happen," Marcus admitted. "The threats, Harrington. I don't feel safe anywhere." Devin's voice was steady. "You're doing the right thing. Fear's part of it, but you're not alone. Keep documenting everything. People are watching. You've already made an impact." Still, the emotional toll was heavy. Marcus barely slept. Each sound outside, sirens, footsteps, cars, triggered a tense spiral of anticipation. Even the warmth of his apartment felt fragile. One evening, a text appeared on his phone from an unknown number. "Stop talking, or next time it won't just be words." His hands trembled. Marcus stared at the screen, the glow reflecting in his wide eyes. He thought of Harrington's face, the ease with which he wielded authority, and the systemic complicity that allowed him to act with impunity. Marcus's decision crystallized in that moment. Fear could not silence him. If anything, it fueled the resolve that had begun when he picked up his phone to record Harrington. He realized this was bigger than a taillight or a single officer. It was about exposing a system, about holding power accountable, and about standing up even when the world tried to push him down. He texted Tanya. "We move forward. All of it. No backing down." The following morning, Marcus met with his lawyer and neighbors to coordinate a safety plan. Cameras, emergency contacts, and community watch schedules were discussed. It was methodical, cautious, a small defense against the storm that Harrington had begun to unleash. Even as Marcus prepared for what lay ahead, a gnawing tension lingered. Harrington was not just an officer. He was a symbol of the entrenched authority that sought to intimidate and control. Marcus could see it in every calculated move, every subtle threat, every whispered lie meant to undermine him. Yet, despite the fear, Marcus's resolve had never been sharper. Every threat, every whispered rumor, every lingering shadow became fuel for the fight ahead. He had been targeted, harassed, and cornered, but he had also been heard, recorded, and witnessed. And somewhere, miles away in the precinct, Harrington studied Marcus's growing following. His own face twisted with a mixture of anger and disbelief. The officer had underestimated the power of one voice, one live recording, one man refusing to be erased. Marcus stared out his apartment window into the night, the city sprawling before him. Red and blue lights glimmered in the distance, a constant reminder that the system was watching. But he was watching too, and he would not stop. The following week, Marcus sat in a small, brightly lit office, the smell of paper and coffee thick in the air. Across from him, Tanya Brooks spread out files and photographs. Each image, each document, was a brick in the case they were building against Harrington. "This is the foundation," Tanya said, tapping a photo of Harrington glaring at Marcus during the traffic stop. "Your video is the cornerstone. But we'll need everything else. Complaints, dashcam footage, witness statements. Every detail counts." Marcus nodded, staring at the images. Seeing Harrington frozen in those frames stirred anger, yes, but also a strange clarity. This was no longer just a personal fight. It was systemic. By the next day, the formal complaint was filed. Marcus walked into the city courthouse, feeling the weight of everyone who had been ignored, silenced, or dismissed in similar situations. The building was cavernous, the walls echoing with the quiet hum of bureaucracy. He found the preliminary hearing scheduled in a small, narrow courtroom. A sense of unease settled in his stomach. Harrington sat at the opposite table, flanked by his union representative, smirking with practiced confidence. His presence radiated control, the kind of authority that didn't need words to intimidate. Marcus felt the tension coil tighter in his chest. The judge, a middle-aged man with glasses perched low on his nose, entered and banged the gavel. The room fell silent. Tanya leaned close to Marcus. "Remember, stick to the facts. Come. Every reaction counts." Harrington's lawyer began the opening argument, painting Marcus as confrontational, exaggerating the encounter, a troublemaker who provoked a routine stop. The words stung, but Marcus's resolve sharpened. He had anticipated this. When it was his turn, Marcus stood, heart hammering. "I was pulled over for a broken taillight," he began, voice steady despite the tension. "Officer Harrington approached me with suspicion, not concern." His hand hovered near his holster. His tone was aggressive. "I decided to record the encounter because I feared for my safety, and because I knew this pattern of behavior was not isolated." The courtroom was silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioning. Harrington's smirk faltered, replaced by a subtle tension that Marcus noticed immediately. Every word he spoke chipped away at the narrative Harrington had tried to control. Tanya guided him through the testimony, prompting witnesses to corroborate the events. Mrs. Latham, the neighbor who had filmed the porch camera, gave a trembling but firm account. "I saw the officer approach Mr. James with unnecessary force. I felt it was wrong," she said. Harrington's colleagues, however, were less forthcoming. Some offered vague accounts, carefully avoiding direct contradiction of their fellow officer. The courtroom highlighted the subtle ways institutional loyalty protected Harrington. Each sidestep, each half-answer, revealed the systemic resistance Marcus was up against. At one point, Harrington leaned over to his lawyer, whispering just loud enough for Marcus to hear. "This isn't over, James. Not by a long shot." Marcus felt the old knot of fear, but it was tempered now by determination. Fear would no longer dictate his actions. The hearing stretched for hours. Documents were submitted, testimonies read, and video clips replayed. Each moment was a battle of narrative versus reality. Harrington attempted to twist the story, painting Marcus as aggressive, but the evidence was stacked firmly against him. After the hearing, Marcus and Tanya stepped outside. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the courthouse steps. Tanya adjusted her bag, glancing at him. "They're trying to make it a he said she said situation, but your video, combined with witnesses, is strong. We just have to keep meticulous records and stay consistent." I didn't expect it to feel this exhausting," Marcus admitted. "Every corner I turn, every person I meet, it feels like I'm being judged or watched." "You are," Tanya said. "But that doesn't mean you're wrong. This system wants to protect itself. It's going to resist. But you're not alone anymore. You have witnesses, you have community support, and you have the law on your side." That evening, Marcus returned home, exhaustion pressing into his bones. He replayed the hearing in his mind. The tight coil of tension in the courtroom, Harrington's forced smile, the moments when truth cut through performance. Even in victory, the fight left an emotional toll. As he scrolled through the growing news coverage, he noticed the public beginning to rally more strongly. "Police abuse caught on tape," headlines blared. Opinion pieces dissected Harrington's behavior. Marcus realized the exposure had become a weapon, shining light on what was often hidden in plain sight. Yet, there was no relief, only a wary understanding that Harrington's attempts to intimidate were far from over. Marcus received another anonymous text that night. "Keep pushing. But remember, we're watching." Marcus stared at the message, heart thudding, but instead of fear, he felt resolve. Every threat, every attack, every whisper of retaliation only underscored the importance of what he was doing. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was amplifying the voices of all those who had been silenced before him. He called Devin. "It's official. Hearing's done, but the battle's only starting. Harrington's not backing down. I can feel it." Devin's voice was firm. "Then don't back down either. You've got the truth, Marcus. That's your strongest weapon." Lying in bed later, Marcus reflected on the day. Courtrooms, lawyers, witnesses, it all felt surreal. He had stepped into a system designed to protect Harrington, yet he had exposed cracks. Each piece of evidence, each witness testimony, was a tiny rebellion against the machinery of power. And in that reflection, Marcus realized something profound. Fear was temporary, but the truth, documented, witnessed, undeniable, was permanent. The legal battle had begun. Harrington might control the badge, the uniform, the narrative, but Marcus now held the record. And for the first time, he believed he could see the arc of justice bending, slowly, inexorably, toward him. The following week, Marcus felt the shift before he even stepped outside. The city was buzzing with his story. Social media was alive with clips from the live stream, interviews, and citizen reactions. People were talking, not just about the broken taillight, not just about Harrington, but about the larger pattern of police overreach, bias, and abuse of power. At a small community center, activists gathered to strategize. Marcus hesitated at the door, uncertainty tightening his chest, but Tanya placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "They're here because of you," she said. "Not just the story, but the courage you showed." Inside, the room was filled with local leaders, journalists, and citizens who had witnessed similar injustices. Signs of support covered the walls. "Justice for Marcus. Accountability now. We see you." The atmosphere was electric, a blend of determination, hope, and righteous anger. "We need a plan," said one activist, a young woman named Carla, her voice firm. "We amplify Marcus's story, contact more media, and make sure the public knows this isn't just an isolated incident. It's a pattern." Marcus swallowed hard, still unsure how much exposure was safe. "But if Harrington retaliates," he began, voice low. "We manage the risk," Carla said firmly. "You're not alone in this fight. We make sure witnesses are protected. We shine light on the truth. That's the safest weapon. Over the next few days, Marcus gave interviews, spoke at press conferences, and allowed journalists to access the video footage. Each encounter was nerve-wracking. Harrington's lawyers and the department tried to downplay the incident, painting Marcus as exaggerating, but the growing chorus of public outrage drowned them out. At a press conference, Marcus faced Harrington directly for the first time since the traffic stop. The officer's lips curled into a tight, dismissive smile. "I followed protocol," Harrington said into the microphones, voice measured, rehearsed. Marcus's response was steady. "Protocol doesn't include intimidation. It doesn't include fear. And it doesn't excuse targeting someone because of the color of their skin." Cameras flashed. The words rippled across social media in real time, reactions pouring in by the second. Even colleagues of Harrington began to murmur, some shaken by the exposure, others resentful but silent. The union's narrative of control was cracking. His authority, once seemingly untouchable, was faltering in the light of evidence and public scrutiny. Back at his apartment, Marcus watched coverage with Tanya. Reports dissected the stop, replayed the live stream, and highlighted systemic patterns. "You're creating change," Tanya said quietly, almost to herself. "Not just for yourself, but for everyone who's been silenced." The media attention brought more than support, it brought pressure. Citizens called for Harrington to face consequences. Online, petitions gathered thousands of signatures demanding an independent investigation. The story spread beyond the city, reaching national news outlets. Despite the momentum, Marcus felt the emotional toll. Every step into public view reopened the fear he'd tried to contain. Threatening messages continued, a constant reminder that the officer's influence hadn't vanished. He received tips that Harrington had been whispering to colleagues and witnesses, attempting to intimidate anyone backing Marcus. Still, the collective voice of the community offered solace. Marcus met with neighborhood witnesses, some of whom had been hesitant before. "I was scared to speak up," admitted one elderly neighbor, voice trembling. "But seeing the support, seeing you stand, it gave me courage." Each story added weight, and each voice amplified the truth. Marcus realized the power of allies, of shared outrage, and of coordinated resistance. He wasn't just a lone individual anymore. He was part of a movement. The tension culminated at a town hall meeting. The room overflowed with citizens, activists, reporters, and local officials. Harrington attended, flanked by a few colleagues, eyes scanning the crowd with an air of authority. Marcus stepped to the podium, voice firm. "We are here not just because of one traffic stop. We are here because these actions are part of a pattern. A system that allows abuse of power, silence, and intimidation. We demand accountability, transparency, and justice." Cameras clicked, smartphones recorded, and the murmurs of agreement swelled into applause. Harrington tried to speak, but the crowd's energy drowned him out. His control over the narrative was slipping, and Marcus felt the long-suppressed fear of retaliation give way to a cautious, steady hope. That night, Marcus reflected on the journey so far. Exposure had brought scrutiny, threats, and emotional strain, but it had also forged alliances he hadn't imagined. Strangers had become allies, witnesses became advocates, and his story, once a solitary act of courage, was now part of a collective demand for justice. Even in the darkness of fear and uncertainty, Marcus understood something fundamental. Accountability wasn't just about punishment. It was about community, visibility, and refusing to allow silence to be the default. As he stared out at the city lights, blinking in the distance, he felt the presence of thousands behind him. Citizens, allies, and witnesses united in a single cause. Harrington's power was formidable, but truth, combined with collective action, was far stronger. And Marcus knew this was only the beginning. The exposure, the public outcry, and the allies he had rallied would carry him forward, into the next stage of the battle, the reckoning that Harrington could no longer avoid. Marcus sat in Tanya's office, files stacked high around them like barricades against the storm they were wading into. Today they were diving deeper, past the live stream, past the threats, past Harrington's carefully curated image, to uncover the patterns of misconduct that the officer had tried to conceal for years. Internal records, prior complaints, dashcam footage from unrelated stops, Tanya explained, spreading a series of documents across the desk. We've cross-referenced everything. Harrington's behavior isn't isolated. It's a pattern. And we have the proof to show it. Marcus leaned over the files, scanning pages of complaints dismissed as minor infractions or unsubstantiated. The same phrasing repeated. Civilians intimidated, witnesses ignored, use of force reports suspiciously absent. Each document felt like a strike against the illusion of authority Harrington had cultivated. People think it's one stop, one incident, Marcus said, voice tight. But when you look at the history, it's overwhelming. How did no one stop him? Tanya shook her head. The system protects itself. Officers like Harrington thrive because there's a culture of silence and cover-up. But now we have witnesses, documentation, and video evidence. We can finally force accountability. Later, they contacted former colleagues, civilians, and witnesses who had been hesitant to speak before. One after another, their stories aligned with Marcus's. A pattern emerged. Harrington had repeatedly escalated situations unnecessarily, targeted certain individuals disproportionately, and used the weight of his uniform to intimidate and silence. As Marcus listened, the emotional toll pressed down. He had known Harrington was aggressive, biased, even abusive, but seeing it documented, seeing the full scope, made the injustice tangible, almost unbearable. Rage, fear, and exhaustion churned in his chest. "We need to organize this carefully," Tanya said, typing rapidly. "We submit it all to the district attorney and internal affairs. Every piece counts. Any misstep could let him evade consequences." That evening, Marcus returned home, reviewing the footage once more. The live stream, the neighbors' recordings, the dashcam clips, all told the same story. Harrington's casual threats, the hovering hand near the holster, the calculated intimidation. It was all part of a consistent pattern of abuse. He received a call from Carla, the activist. "We're planning a press release," she said, voice urgent. "If we release this information publicly, it has to be coordinated with the legal team. We're talking national attention here." Marcus hesitated. Exposure had already brought threats and stress. But he understood the stakes. If the truth stayed hidden, Harrington would continue to operate unchecked. "Do it," he said finally. "The public deserves to see the full story." Within days, the press release went live. Journalists dissected Harrington's record, highlighting years of complaints, subtle harassment patterns, and ignored warnings from within the department. National media picked it up. The narrative Harrington had tried to control was unraveling. Meanwhile, Harrington's colleagues began to distance themselves. Some quietly filed new statements, corroborating Marcus's claims. Union leaders attempted damage control, but the tide had shifted. The meticulously built fortress of loyalty and silence was cracking. One night, Marcus received an email from an anonymous former officer. "You've exposed what we couldn't. Be careful, but know that you've done something we've all wanted to do for years." Marcus stared at the screen, feeling a mix of relief, validation, and the crushing weight of responsibility. The district attorney's office scheduled a meeting to review the full evidence. Marcus and Tanya presented every document, every video, and every witness testimony. The room was quiet except for the shuffle of papers, punctuated by Marcus's tense breaths. When the lead prosecutor leaned back and said, "This is comprehensive. Harrington will face charges," Marcus felt a strange, cautious relief. But it was tempered by exhaustion and the emotional toll of the fight. Even with this breakthrough, Marcus couldn't ignore the personal cost. Friends and neighbors remained wary, fearful of lingering retaliation. Public attention brought scrutiny, misrepresentation, and online harassment. Every day was a balancing act between justice and personal safety. Then came the call he'd been waiting for. Harrington had been formally charged with misconduct, intimidation, and abuse of authority. The news spread quickly, amplified by Marcus's community and national media. Reactions poured in. Congratulations, relief, outrage, and renewed calls for systemic reform. Marcus allowed himself a brief moment of quiet victory. Standing by his apartment window, looking at the city lights, he reflected on the journey. The live stream that had started it all, the threats that had tested his resolve, the allies who had strengthened him, and the painstaking uncovering of truth that had finally forced accountability. But he also recognized the cost. The emotional toll, the sleepless nights, the constant tension. These were scars that wouldn't fade easily. Justice had been served in one form, but trauma lingered. Yet, in the quiet, he felt something else. A sense of purpose, a renewed commitment to fight not just for himself, but for others who couldn't speak out, for those silenced by fear, and for the truth that often went unseen. Harrington's fall was imminent, but Marcus understood the fight was never just about one man. It was about exposing systemic corruption, standing up against intimidation, and proving that courage, documentation, and truth could pierce even the densest walls of power. As he turned off the lights and prepared for bed, Marcus whispered to himself, voice steady, "This is only the beginning. But I will not stop." The battle had revealed the truth. Now it was time to see it enforced. The courtroom was packed, every seat occupied by journalists, neighbors, and curious citizens. Marcus sat with Tanya beside him, his hands resting on the stack of documents they had brought. Across the room, Harrington sat rigid, his smirk gone, replaced by a tight-lipped tension that spoke volumes. The air felt electric, charged with the weight of months of scrutiny, fear, and determination. The judge entered, the gavel striking sharply against the desk. Silence fell, the kind of silence that pressed against the chest and held it there. Harrington's attorney attempted to spin his narrative one last time, describing the traffic stop as routine, and Marcus as confrontational. But the evidence, video footage, witness statements, and a trail of internal complaints, was overwhelming. When Tanya stood to present the compiled records, Marcus could see the shift in the courtroom. Officers who had remained silent now exchanged uneasy glances. The narrative Harrington had relied on for years was collapsing. Marcus's own testimony was measured, calm, yet powerful. "This isn't just about me," he said, voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. "It's about every person who has been intimidated, silenced, or dismissed because someone in power decided their voice didn't matter. And it's about holding that power accountable." Cameras flashed, recording every word. As the trial unfolded, the judge and jury meticulously reviewed the evidence. Harrington's defense faltered under the weight of documented abuses. Dashcam videos, neighbor recordings, and corroborating statements painted a consistent, undeniable pattern. Every attempt to discredit Marcus or the witnesses faltered. Outside the courtroom, supporters of Marcus gathered, holding signs and cheering quietly when the news crews panned the crowd. The community's presence was a tangible reminder that justice was no longer a solitary pursuit. It was a collective demand. By late afternoon, the verdict was delivered. Harrington was removed from the force, charged with misconduct, intimidation, and abuse of authority. A murmur swept through the courtroom. Marcus felt a mixture of relief, triumph, and exhaustion. Finally, the person who had tried to control, intimidate, and silence him was being held accountable. Yet the victory was bittersweet. The months of fear, harassment, sleepless nights, and constant vigilance had taken a toll. Marcus's hands shook slightly as he packed his documents. He had won in the eyes of the law, but the psychological scars lingered. Friends and neighbors who had testified were wary, some reluctant to speak publicly again. The attention and exposure had left lasting imprints. Later that evening, Marcus returned home. He walked through his apartment slowly, the quiet hum of the city outside contrasting sharply with the tension that had dominated his life for months. He thought of the threats, the anonymous messages, the harassment, and the weight of being constantly watched. Despite the legal victory, the emotional cost was heavy. Devin met him at the door, offering a tired but warm smile. "You did it," he said simply. "You stood your ground. And the truth came out." Marcus nodded, a weary but genuine smile breaking across his face. "Yeah, but it's not just about me. It's bigger than that. There are so many others who can't fight like this. I just hope this sets a precedent." The following days brought a mixture of relief and ongoing reflection. Interviews, community meetings, and media requests continued, but Marcus had learned to navigate the exposure cautiously. He took deliberate steps to protect his mental health, leaning on Tanya, his family, and trusted friends. Even as the city celebrated the outcome, Marcus understood that true justice was rarely clean or painless. Harrington's removal and charges were victories, but the system that allowed him to operate unchecked still existed. The fight against abuse of power, systemic bias, and intimidation was ongoing. Yet, in the quiet moments, Marcus also felt a deep sense of resilience. He had faced fear, threats, and isolation, and had chosen courage. He had documented truth, rallied allies, and forced accountability. Each small act, recording a phone video, sharing evidence, refusing to be silenced, had rippled outward, creating change. Standing on his balcony one evening, Marcus watched the city lights shimmer across the streets. Somewhere below, neighbors talked, children laughed, and life carried on. Felt ordinary yet profound. He had survived the storm, and while scars remained, so did strength. He whispered to himself, voice steady yet soft, "We fought, we saw the truth, and we survived. And we keep moving forward." Justice had been served, but the cost was real, lingering in quiet moments and sleepless nights. Yet Marcus also knew this. Courage, documentation, and perseverance could challenge power, expose wrongdoing, and spark change. Harrington's downfall was proof, but the journey forward was just beginning. In that moment, Marcus felt a mix of sorrow and triumph, grief and resilience. He had endured, exposed corruption, and survived the storm. The system had been shaken, if only slightly, and the world had witnessed the power of one determined voice. As the city lights glimmered against the night, Marcus realized the truth he had fought for was more than evidence, more than a verdict. It was a reaffirmation that standing up against injustice, no matter the cost, mattered. That even in a system designed to silence, courage could echo, ripple, and inspire change. And though the scars remained, Marcus James knew one thing clearly. He had survived the fight, and in surviving, he had begun to transform the world around him. Weeks had passed since Harrington's removal, and the city was still buzzing with discussion. Marcus James walked down familiar streets, noticing small shifts in the world around him. Neighbors greeted him warmly. Some whispered thanks, others nodded silently, acknowledgement passing between them like an unspoken pact. The live stream, once a flash of panic and courage, had become a touchstone for the community. Yet Marcus carried a quiet tension. The court had delivered justice, but the emotional scars remained. Thick, persistent, and invisible to anyone who hadn't lived through the fear, the threats, the constant scrutiny. Every police siren, every shadow in a parking lot, every unknown number on his phone reminded him that change was never absolute, that vigilance was ongoing. Tanya met him at his apartment with a stack of letters. "Look at this," she said, voice light with a rare note of triumph. Marcus flipped through them. Dozens of messages from people across the country, sharing similar stories, asking for guidance, thanking him for speaking out. One woman wrote, "Because of your courage, I finally reported my own officer. You've inspired change beyond your own fight." Marcus felt a swell of bittersweet pride. Each letter was validation, but also a reminder of the scope of injustice still present. "I never imagined this would reach so many," he admitted. "You didn't just reach people," Tanya said. "You sparked them into action. That's real change." As they talked, Marcus's phone buzzed. Another news outlet wanted an interview, this time for a national podcast. He hesitated. Exposure had brought both allies and threats, and he was acutely aware of the personal cost. But deep down, he knew he couldn't remain silent. The podcast was scheduled for that evening. Marcus prepared notes, but he knew it wasn't enough to recite facts. He had to convey emotion, context, and the human cost. The conversation was raw, dialogue-heavy, and unpolished, exactly what the audience needed to hear. "People fear speaking up because the system is intimidating," Marcus said into the microphone, voice calm but firm. "I know that fear intimately. But silence allows abuse to continue. If one person can record, share, and speak truth, even when threatened, it changes the equation." The host leaned in, nodding. "And what about the personal cost? You've faced threats, harassment, scrutiny. Was it worth it?" Marcus paused, eyes on the floor for a moment. "It's complicated. The cost was real. Sleep lost, relationships strained, fear constantly present. But if I hadn't spoken up, if the neighbors hadn't stepped forward, if we hadn't documented everything, Harrington would still be on the force, and others would continue to suffer. Courage comes with scars, but silence comes with chains." After the interview, Marcus returned to his apartment. He sat quietly, letting the words settle. Change was happening slowly, but it required persistence, community, and personal sacrifice. He looked at the city through his window, lights twinkling, distant sirens, the hum of life carrying on, and realized that the fight was far from over. That night, a knock came at his door. Marcus opened it to find Mrs. Latham, holding a small tray of cookies. "I wanted to say thank you," she said softly. "Not just for standing up for yourself, but for inspiring all of us to speak." Marcus smiled, gratitude warming him amidst the lingering tension. "We did it together," he said. "I just happened to be in the right place at the wrong time. And you all supported me." Over the next few weeks, community workshops, online forums, and neighborhood meetings sprouted, all inspired by the incident. Marcus attended selectively, always cautious, but his presence carried weight. Every conversation, every witness, every shared story reinforced the importance of collective vigilance and accountability. Yet even in these moments of progress, the cost lingered. Marcus noticed the subtle anxiety he carried. A glance at a patrol car, the faintest shift in a neighbor's tone, a late-night text from an unknown number. Trauma didn't vanish with verdicts or headlines. It lingered in the mind and body like a shadow. One evening, Marcus sat on the balcony, city lights stretching infinitely below. He thought of Harrington, not with anger this time, but as a reminder of the power imbalance he had challenged. Justice had been served in the courts, yes, but systemic corruption remained. And the lessons he had learned, the vigilance, the documentation, the courage, were tools he would carry forward. Devin joined him, passing a bottle of water. "You did more than fight one officer," Devin said. "You've shaken the system in a small way. People are paying attention now. They're listening." Marcus nodded quietly. "It's not perfect. It's never perfect. But it's real. And it's lasting. That matters." In the months that followed, Marcus continued documenting, speaking out, and supporting others facing injustice. He returned to ordinary routines, but ordinary felt different now, charged with awareness, responsibility, and a persistent sense of purpose. Standing at the balcony one last time that night, Marcus whispered to himself, voice steady, "We survived. We fought. And even with scars we endure. Justice isn't a moment. It's an ongoing echo." And as the city hummed below him, Marcus realized that his fight, though personal, had become a catalyst for collective awareness. Harrington's downfall was significant, but the ripples of courage and accountability would continue far beyond that single officer, far beyond one city, into the lives of everyone willing to witness, record, and speak the truth. The fight was never over, but Marcus James had learned that even in the darkest moments, resilience, vigilance, and collective courage could carve a path toward justice. And that path was only beginning. Months had passed since Harrington's removal, and Marcus James walked through the city with a measured confidence. The world hadn't become perfect overnight. Systemic issues persisted, and there were still whispers of resistance, but he had seen firsthand that one voice, amplified by courage and truth, could spark tangible change. He entered the local community center where a group had gathered to discuss reforms in local policing. Children, teenagers, parents, activists, and journalists filled the room. Marcus felt a surge of pride. This was no longer just his story. It had become a movement. A young man approached, holding his phone like a shield. "Mr. James," he said, voice shaking slightly. I recorded an incident last week. It wasn't as serious as yours, but I didn't know what to do. Now I do." Marcus smiled, a small, tired curve of recognition. That's the first step. Documentation matters. Every story matters. You don't have to be alone in this. Nearby, Carla, the activist who had been with him since the early days of the livestream, organized the room. "We're setting up a mentorship program," she explained to Marcus. "We want to guide people who are afraid to speak up, help them navigate the legal and emotional challenges." Marcus listened, heart swelling. The ripple effect was real. This wasn't about vengeance or personal glory. It was about ensuring that voices silenced for years could now speak, be heard, and find allies. Later, Marcus met with Tanya in her office to review ongoing investigations into systemic abuses. "We're not done," she said firmly. "Harrington's removal is significant, but the culture that allowed him to operate unchecked still exists. We need to maintain pressure." "I know," Marcus replied, leaning back in his chair. "But it feels different now. I'm not just fighting alone. I have allies, witnesses, and the community. We've created momentum." As they spoke, a notification appeared on Marcus's phone. A news feature covering the mentorship program and the ongoing reforms inspired by his case. The headline read, "From taillight stop to movement. How one man exposed systemic abuse." Marcus scrolled through the comments. Supportive messages, gratitude from strangers, and stories of people inspired to speak out filled the screen. Yet, mixed among them were reminders of the risks. Skepticism, threats, and warnings about complacency. He closed the phone and exhaled. Courage, he realized, was a continuous act. The fight didn't end with one verdict or one viral video. It was ongoing, evolving, and collective. That evening, Marcus walked through his old neighborhood, observing the familiar streets. Neighbors waved, cars slowed to acknowledge him, and some of the younger residents whispered among themselves about activism, rights, and accountability. He smiled quietly, realizing the culture of fear and silence had begun to shift. At home, he sat with Devon, reflecting on the journey. "Do you ever think it could have gone differently?" Marcus asked, voice soft. "All the threats, the harassment. It could have broken me." Devon shook his head. "You let it strengthen you instead. You didn't fight for revenge. You fought for truth. And that's what makes it lasting. That's the legacy." Marcus thought of Harrington, now facing legal consequences and public scrutiny. The officer's power had been dismantled, but more importantly, the system had been forced to acknowledge the flaws it had long ignored. Accountability was messy, slow, and incomplete, but it had begun. In the weeks that followed, Marcus received invitations to speak at schools, community forums, and even city council meetings. He shared his story not as a tale of personal triumph, but as a roadmap for others confronting intimidation, bias, or abuse. Each conversation, each lecture, strengthened the network of voices demanding justice. One afternoon, Marcus returned to the scene of the original traffic stop. The street was quiet, ordinary in appearance, yet charged with memory. He stood for a moment, reflecting on the live stream, the threats, the legal battles, and the public outcry. This place, once a site of fear, had become a symbol of resilience. A neighbor approached. "It's strange," she said softly. "It used to feel like a place of danger. Now it feels like hope." Marcus nodded. "Hope built on vigilance," he said. "On speaking up, recording the truth, and standing together." That evening, as the sun set across the city skyline, Marcus sat on his balcony, letting the quiet wash over him. The emotional scars remained, The sleepless nights, the constant awareness of risk, the tension, but they were balanced by resilience, purpose, and connection. He whispered to himself, voice steady and resolute, "This is the legacy we leave." Courage isn't just surviving, it's inspiring others to stand with you, to speak, to witness, and to demand accountability. In the months and years to come, Marcus continued to document, speak, and guide. He had transformed personal trauma into collective empowerment. Harrington's fall was significant, but the lasting impact was the ripple of courage across a community, a city, and even beyond. As the lights of the city twinkled beneath him, Marcus realized the truth he had fought for was no longer his alone. It belonged to every person who had been intimidated, silenced, or dismissed. Justice had been achieved in one case, but the fight continued, stronger, more connected, and impossible to ignore. And in that quiet, reflective moment, Marcus James understood the deepest lesson of all. Courage, once awakened, could echo far beyond a single life, transforming fear into resilience, silence into witness, and oppression into change. He stood, inhaled deeply, and looked out at the city, ready to continue the fight, not just for himself but for everyone who would follow.